Thank you, everyone, for joining today. If you can't already tell, I'm pretty excited to present our 2025 Advertising Trends Report, which, as always, covers what's happening in the thoughts, feelings, and actions of consumers, what's shaping the decisions of media buyers and marketers, and why out of home is an essential element of any media mix. Um, as I mentioned, I've got three sections as always, and here you'll find a very quick rundown of the top 5 trends for each area. These trends were also the ones that we spotlighted on the blog in the 3 posts doing the deep dive into the trends report over the past 2 weeks. So first up, consumers. Let's start from 35,000 feet. What are the vibes? But let's start by saying this. Everything in this report is happening against the background of Donald Trump returning to the White House. And while America is bitterly divided about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, the stock market was pretty unanimous in its verdict, hitting record highs in the day after the election. And while consumers may find themselves with more cash in hand this year, thanks to expected Fed rate cuts and slowing inflation, boosting overall demand, while on the supply side, businesses should consider how to make the most of Trump administration policies that affect them. Tariffs, on one hand, for example, can create an opening for domestic alternatives to increase their market share. And there's no denying that 17% inflation over the past 2 years has put pressure on consumers. However, if a record-setting 2024 Cyber Monday is any indication, the worst may be over. 4 in 10 say they're better off this year than last, and more than half expect to be better off in 2025 than they were in 2024. And of course, that level of inflation did lead consumers to tighten their belts in some areas more than others. And fast food as the category where people were most likely to cut back is interesting because the increasing prices of fast food have greatly outpaced inflation, getting enough mainstream attention and media coverage that consumers began to realize that they were being gouged, changing their behavior accordingly. And in fact, now you're starting to see the pendulum swing back in the other direction as brands like Subway and Taco Bell lean back into value pricing. And now that consumers are feeling a little better about their finances, those categories where discretionary spending took the hardest hits must work to win back lapsed customers. But what about categories where cutting back isn't always realistic? Store brands to the rescue. Even beyond places like Aldi and Trader Joe's, where most of what people buy is in-house private labels, consumers are discovering that they can buy the products they need in the quality they demand at prices they can afford. Retail giants like Target and Amazon have dozens of these private label brands across essential categories. But private label brands are subject to the same funnel as everybody else, and they still need to build awareness, consideration, and intent. And there is one area, though, in which our willingness to spend hasn't waned, and it's wellness. Now, wellness is a word that means different things to different people, but whether it's a restful night's sleep, a healthy diet, or a peaceful mind, wellness is something that consumers value. And that 3 out of 4 say that wellness is more important than economic success goes to show
No.
that ultimately people just want to feel good. It seems pretty obvious, but sometimes the most obvious things are the easiest to take for granted. And that's why brands that make people feel good should remind consumers that's what they do. And one category agnostic casualty of the rising cost of living has been loyalty. Because as it turns out, increasing prices is the single biggest factor that can damage it. But ironically, more than 2/3 will pay more to shop the brands they're loyal to. So what creates loyalty? The single biggest driver of it is a high quality product. Treating customers as individuals is also a characteristic of the brands consumers rate as their favorites. And despite declining loyalty, utilization of loyalty programs is up. Loyalty programs deliver value and personalization to the consumer, not to mention zero and first party data for the brand. And the thing about consumer loyalty is that it's an attitude, not just a behavior. And most people will go back to the same brands over and over out of force of habit rather than a deep emotional connection. But real loyalty, driving not just repeat purchases, but product evangelism, that comes from building that emotional connection. And how do brands build that bond? The actual experience is paramount. But beyond that, consumers respond on an emotional level to offers, personalization, and when brands show up in unexpected places or stand for something. Although standing for something can be treacherous ground because we don't all stand for the same things. But 70% of us prefer to buy brands that reflect our personal values, and 41% say misalignment with our values make us less inclined to buy. So is standing for something an opportunity or a threat? Well, it depends on the audience. Broader audiences pose more risk than narrow ones. When brands and their customers are in alignment, like in the case of Ben and Jerry's, expression of those shared values strengthens the bond between them. However, when brands misjudge their audience, as for example, Sticker Mule did in the weeks leading up to the election, taking a stand can backfire badly. And the last slide mentioned that 1 in 5 consumers prioritize what a brand stands for over its prices. But there is one significant exception here, and it's sustainability. Consumers who recognize the impact of their own individual decisions are more willing than ever to pay for sustainable products, especially in the categories of CPG, auto, and home construction. But individual decisions can only get us so far. 69% of Americans say that large businesses need to do more, indicating receptiveness to campaigns like this one from United that showcase a company's efforts in the sustainability space. And let's stay with climate change for a moment because it's not some distant abstract threat as the LA fires just demonstrated. In fact, last year, 7 in 10 Americans experienced extreme weather. 7 in 10. And as a result of this growingly universal experience, the partisan divide on the issue isn't what it used to be. And after disaster strikes, consumers overwhelmingly look to business to step up by supporting relief efforts. However, after a weather event is not the time for the local businesses that rebuild their communities to get their name out there. So by maintaining an evergreen presence in the communities that they serve, roofers, plumbers, and other contractors can ensure that they're the first name that comes to mind when it matters. And we've been feeling lonely. You've probably heard about the loneliness epidemic. But it's not for lack of effort. We're going out and doing things in record numbers. From Electric Daisy Carnival to the WNBA, 2024 saw attendance records set across a variety of event categories. Coming out of the pandemic, we had revenge travel, but going into 2025, we are living like there's no tomorrow, and that includes pulling the trigger on bucket list experiences. And guess where else we're going? The store. Last year, every single e-commerce channel was preferred by a lower percentage than in 2023. Meanwhile, the number who say they prefer shopping in physical stores rose from 20% to 28%. Nearly 2 out of 3 Zoomers prefer IRL shopping to doing it online, and nearly everybody, regardless of age, says that instant gratification is why. Gen Z choosing in-store shopping over online ordering is part of a larger trend from digital to analog. Zoomers see an average of 6 movies a year in the theaters, and over 50% of Gen Z men would rather watch a DVD than use a streaming service. Gen Z is also a driving force behind the resurgence of vinyl LP records. And this is probably the longest anyone's ever gone in a PowerPoint without mentioning AI, but here we are. So there are 2 areas right now where consumers are mostly receptive to using artificial intelligence. They are shopping and travel booking. AI-fueled shopping assistants can impact both the top of the funnel with recommendations and the bottom with price comparison. And as for travel, it's the subpar user experience of the status quo that's got people open to using AI. For example, more than 1 in 3 travelers require more than 10 different websites to plan a trip. So, generally speaking, consumers are most receptive to AI use cases that are labor intensive but light in incremental value for all that extra work. So, overwhelmingly, consumers are not on board with AI created art, music, and entertainment. As author Joanna Makajuska put it, I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. But the main thing holding AI back from mass acceptance right now is trust or the lack thereof. 4 in 10 Americans are worried that AI might end the human race entirely. That is an actual statistic from a respected pollster. Might be a little over the top, but more realistic and widely recognized risk areas of artificial intelligence are bias, ethics, and accuracy. Not to mention that plenty of consumers just don't plain seem to like it yet. AI companies have a lot of work to do in terms of cleaning up the image and making consumers comfortable with what they do. Moving on from AI to RTO, what's the latest? Well, 1 in 3 employers have now implemented full return to office policies, with Amazon and Dell being among the latest big names to do so. And among companies with structured hybrid policies, 2/3 require 3 days in the office weekly. And looking ahead, the Trump administration has rolled out an RTO mandate that looks like it could impact up to 2 million people. And as return to office continues to gain traction, transit utilization is similarly on the rise. Here in New York, the MTA set a post-pandemic ridership record last month, and year over year for the first 3 quarters of 2024, 8 of our transit partners saw double-digit ridership growth, including Caltrain Commuter Rail and Muni in San Francisco, as well as WMATA's bus and subway in DC and the T in Boston. So that's a look at the 2025 consumer. Now let's look at the advertising industry as a whole. That Myers Report survey that came out last month did more than just call us an industry leader across metrics. It also identified the top decision factors that go into media buys for agencies and brand marketers. Cost efficiency, reach, and brand safety were 1, 2, and 3. And not coincidentally, they were 3 of the metrics where we crushed it. One important distinction to take away from this survey: agents prioritize cost and innovation, while brand safety, contextual relevance, audience targeting, and programmatic availability are top priorities for brands. And last year, our word of the year was enshittification. This year, it's brain rot, which the Oxford University Press defines as deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, especially viewed as the result of overconsumption of material, now particularly online content, considered to be trivial or unchallenging. Basically, we're overwhelmed by technology and we're less receptive to digital advertising as a result. 2 out of 3 consumers don't even notice digital ads anymore because there are so many, while more than 3 out of 4 would stop visiting a website entirely if too many ads interfered, and even more choose to skip ads when given the option. Brain rot isn't the only thing that digital advertisers have to worry about. There's also fraud, which gobbled up more than 1/4 of global ad spend last year. CTV was the channel with the highest rate of overall invalid traffic, while TikTok and X, formerly known as Twitter, had the most click fraud. This year, advertisers could be looking at $122 billion in fraud costs. And along with fraud, brand safety is another big concern around the impression quality of digital channels. And there's a good reason to be concerned. Impressions that are brand safe convert at a rate 233% higher than impressions that aren't. Beyond diminished conversion rates, encountering a brand in an unsafe context reduces purchase intent and damages brand opinion. And while social media certainly faces challenges, it's been making especially significant gains lately at television's expense. Smartphones are now the primary screen on which to watch video, and social media now has more daily users than TV, which is absolutely incredible. And it's important to note that while people now use YouTube more than they watch linear TV, YouTube is much more saturated with advertising, with a share of ads nearly twice its share of view time. And speaking of saturation, the question, is streaming saturated? This viral meme says yes. The shift away from linear programming and television hardware is just one of the ways the TV landscape is changing. On the OTT side, streaming is showing signs that it may have peaked. Subscription video on demand providers like Netflix have seen record numbers of cancellations, while free ad supported television services like Tubi continue to trend upward. Cost is part of the calculus that's leading consumers to cancel streaming subscriptions. But another significant factor has been the shift to serial churning, where consumers will subscribe to a service to watch something specific and then cancel once they've finished. Streamers thus need to constantly promote their latest and greatest offerings in order to lure those consumers back. So earlier we covered how consumers are hesitant about using AI. But what they're not hesitant about is using AI as a search engine. And the lines between the two are blurring for sure, especially with the introduction of Google's AI overviews, Perplexity, and ChatGPT's own search engine. And search has always been volatile, but in an era where almost 6 out of 10 Google searches result in no click whatsoever, and 3 out of 10 clicks just go to other Google sites. Brands can't rely on search alone to fuel the top of the funnel by itself the way that it once could. And while marketers are generally favorable about artificial intelligence, more than half believe it to be overhyped, and nearly all recognize it as a brand safety risk. Consumer reactions to AI-generated ads are mixed. Although if the overwhelmingly negative reaction to Coca-Cola's 24 holiday campaign ads was any indication, brands should proceed with care, especially considering that 43% say they don't trust AI-generated ads. But for all the hype, the real value in AI for marketers may be less in large language models like ChatGPT and DeepSeek, and more in machine learning tasks like behavior-driven personalized recommendations and predictive analytics. But if you've noticed that it's getting harder to find what you're looking for on the internet, it's not just search engines. It kind of sucks now across the board. And as e-commerce retailers become less influential at the top of the funnel, social media has emerged to fill the gap as an important product discovery source. For over 4 in 10, they search social before Google when seeking product inspo. And social commerce isn't just about product discovery. That buzz drives down funnel metrics too, especially with the help of content creators, aka influencers, whose importance is only expected to grow. Unsurprisingly, Gen Z and millennials are the generations most receptive to changing brands on an influencer recommendation, but overall, half of consumers would seek a new product based on something they saw via social. 2 out of 3 consumers, though, consider paid partnerships to be inauthentic. But let's focus on the third consumer. What is it that makes an influencer partnership click? It's authenticity, which consumers define most commonly as consistency and honesty. What that means is that in terms of these partnerships, they work best when the brand, creator, and audience are all aligned. It's because what an endorsement is at its core is a transfer of credibility from the endorser to the brand. If the partnership doesn't fit, the credibility isn't there, and the results will reflect that. Interestingly, though, research has found that the sweet spot for influencer partnerships is when just 9% of their followers are aligned with what the brand is trying to sell. All right, time for a quick non-judgmental survey. How many of you have your phones in your hands right now? Probably a few of you, but it's cool because this is just how we live now. We've all got a lot going on, and multitasking allows us to effectively stretch a 24-hour day to accommodate more than 32 hours worth of activity. But what we gain in productivity, we lose in attention, which is especially important for media buyers, considering that social media and video viewing are the digital activities most likely to be multitasked. That results in every impression on social and digital video having less of a chance to make an impact. The lower quality of those impressions is compounded by the negative effects that multitasking has on the brain, such as reduced recall, diminished memory encoding, and increased stress. Television advertising is subject to the effects of multitasking as well, but that's just one factor reducing impression quality for this medium. Another one in four commercials play out to an empty room. And between those two factors, only 43% of TV commercials get looked at all. And when frequency capping on programmatic CTV campaigns fails, which is often, impressions are often delivered back to back with diminishing returns. And the distribution of the ads isn't even either, with 61% of CTV ads going to just 13% of households. Put all of this together, and it's easy to understand why television has fallen out of favor among marketers and media buyers. At the end of the day, impressions are not a commodity, and those that deliver high levels of attention outperform those that don't. And the threshold between low attention and high is the 2.5-second mark, because that's the point at which long-term memory encoding happens in the brain. 2.5 seconds might not sound like much, but less than 20% of ads get there. Campaigns on high attention platforms, such as out of home, show a 65% lift in business impacts, such as profitability and customer acquisition, and perform comparably at low frequency to campaigns running at high frequency on low attention platforms. Low attention has consequences, including misattributing ads to a competitor, reduced brand awareness, and reduced market share. But perhaps most interestingly, there's absolutely no correlation between attention levels and CPMs. Attention makes a big difference down funnel too, with high attention media showing triple-digit lifts in conversion rates and incremental sales, along with a CPC that's less than 50 cents on the dollar compared to low attention media. And while the 2.5-second mark is where long-term memory encoding begins, that's not where the neuro impact ends. Ads that capture at least 10 seconds of attention make an even bigger impact across brand metrics, most notably 141% lift in ad recall. And choosing the right channel is just a part of the attention puzzle. Then you have to create an ad that's worth looking at. Fortunately, when it comes to attention, there are a few better ways to secure it than with good old reliable contextual relevance. It quadruples unaided recall and makes an ad 25% more memorable while lifting purchase intent and favorability. Ultimately, context in general, not just the surroundings of an ad, but the circumstances of someone's life, can account for more than half of a purchase decision. And ultimately, advertisers want to make consumers feel something. But the most common emotional reaction to an ad is neutrality, no emotion at all. And that's bad news for brands, since emotional campaigns make 3.5 times the impact of rational ones, along with an 80% greater likelihood of driving social sharing or word of mouth. And people are more evocative than products. So ad creative that reflects that drives 40% more brain response peaks, 40% greater long-term memorability, and 15% more personal relevance. They say that sex sells, but these days, what people are really buying is empathy. So finally, let's explore what's happening in the world out of home and how it addresses some of these challenges that we've previously covered. We dedicated quite a bit of time to attention in the previous section, and this is why. Out-of-home ads average 12 seconds of total attention. That's more than enough to significantly impact consideration and purchase intent. Remember that very critical 2.5-second attention memory threshold that I mentioned? While only 1 of 5 ads overall earn that much attention, 9 out of 10 out-of-home ads do. That means that out-of-home ads are nearly 6 times more likely to be committed to long-term memory than digital. And these findings were consistent across categories and formats. And even better, the percentage of consumers who pay attention to out-of-home is growing at a faster clip than any other medium, an increase of 7 points since 2022. Digital out-of-home commands even more attention, delivering more than triple the neural response and memory activity of traditional static formats. It's yet another data point proving the power of digital out-of-home, the favorite advertising medium of consumers and marketers alike. Digital out-of-home is also the ad format most likely to drive activation, both online and in the real world. We did include this Harris poll data in the mid-year trends report, though, so I won't dwell here. Digital out-of-home is also particularly powerful in the last mile of the buyer's journey as digital out-of-home ads drive store visitation and purchases. This data also from the May 2024 Harris poll, OAAA drop. Programmatic, another important element of the digital out-of-home story, especially as advertisers validate their campaigns with attribution studies proving brand lift, footfall, or website visitation. And last year, programmatic got a quarter out of every dollar spent on digital out-of-home. By next year, it'll get every third dollar. That growth is mirrored by OUTFRONT's recent programmatic transit expansion. With digital screens and mass transit systems across 8 markets, OUTFRONT offers advertisers the ability to execute a targeted programmatic campaign at nationwide scale. How hot of a topic is measurement and attribution? Well, the FAQ that we did on it on the blog wound up being the most popular post of the year. Yeah, it's that popular. And another impressive data point, we've doubled the quantity of our attribution research every year for the past 5 years. When it comes to delivering the right message to the right audience in the right moment, contextual relevance is the platonic ideal. And delivering it through the use of dynamic digital creative helps ensure that a campaign has as much oomph in week 4 as it does in week 1. Something as simple as changing the day of the week or incorporating the current temperature is enough to make an ad more engaging, increasing dwell time, awareness, and sales. And when you combine a relevant product and a relevant environment, that's where the magic really happens. So staying in the XLab's advanced capability zone for a moment, spatial out-of-home is more ubiquitous than ever, but somehow it never seems to get old. 3D billboards and small format Xscape tech defy expectations, which is why they stick in our minds and get shared to our socials. Brands that use this technology are perceived as more innovative and more premium. Spatial creative also increases attention levels by 15% compared to plain old two-dimensional. More than half of consumers would share a spatial 3D ad on social, and 2/3 say that it makes them more likely to buy the product advertised. And the hypnotic appeal of the 3D billboard is just one way to achieve social out-of-home success. But broadly speaking, entertainment value is the biggest reason that social users share out-of-home campaigns. Ads that teach something or contain offers are also likely to be shared. So what do these 3 things have in common? They each offer something of value to their audiences. And not only that, by sharing the billboard on their socials, now the person standing in front of the billboard is doing the same for their audience. And that's the ultimate secret to social out-of-home, delivering transferable value. And influencers are often a key element of a social out-of-home strategy, and the latest research from the Harris poll validated that yes, people do listen to influencers. Yes, their endorsements do really make a difference. And influencers are especially effective at driving perceptions of high quality and trustworthiness because, as I mentioned in the previous section, they're essentially loaning out their credibility to the brands. So the final piece of the Q4 Harris poll research focused on what happens when you place an ad in an iconic location like Times Square or the Sunset Strip. And the effect is similar to that of influencer endorsements, although iconic locations were a little bit better at communicating memorability and desirability, while influencers were a little bit better at inspiring trust. And humans are complicated creatures because even though Zoomers are buying DVDs and going to the mall like it was still 2005, they're also enthusiastically embracing out of home interactivity with an engagement rate much higher than that of older generations. Their interest in spatial out of home is 9 points higher than the general population, and their interest in dynamic content is 7 points higher. But it's not just digital. Gen Z is also 16% more likely to tell others about a billboard with extensions. And speaking of traditional static out of home, did you know that it can help mitigate the overall carbon emissions of a media campaign? Because when an ad is served to someone's phone, one person sees it. But when a billboard goes up, one single effort delivers impressions to a month's worth of audience. That makes traditional formats more carbon efficient than programmatic display, video, or CTV, and not just by a little. We're talking about a difference of as much as 336%. And the industry level view of out of home for 2025, once again, we are expected to outperform other traditional media owners, all of which are seeing negative growth. And this has been, except for the pandemic, this has been a constant trend since 2010. And it's expected to continue like this until at least 2028. And finally, I just wanted to tie everything up with a recap of our Myers report rankings. They surveyed buyers and marketers about their experiences with 50 media companies across all sectors of the industry, and Outfront was the only company in all of advertising to place in the top three in terms of reach, cost efficiency, brand safety, communication of value, and attentive sales organization support. The first three of which were identified up front as the most important decision factors in an ad buy. And with that, congratulations, everyone. You are now on trend. You are now prepared for 2025.